I think about what you're saying about importance and how the brain process was important and unimportant, that's a full contact sport,
Hmm.
right? So your body has to pick up on like sensory receptors, all different kinds of things are going on for you to actually dial into something and not focus on something else.
Right, 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 right.
So it's an interesting dynamic. I've been looking at different kinds of studies on how we process things that are unimportant versus important versus urgent.
Right, because you could do that little matrix. I think it was a Covey thing, urgent
Hmm.
versus important.
Right.
Um, well, and I would think that urgent, the moment we're looking at urgent, we're looking upgrid.
Yes,
So
exactly.
if it's urgent and it's important, it's more likely to get done. So that quadrant would kind of, I don't know if you guys can see where I'm squiggling here, but that vector would be upgrid. And certainly the higher the level of urgency, um, the more impact on outcome, and the higher level of importance, the greater the impact on outcome. If tension is high and importance is high, that's what Covey is talking about as urgent and important.
Hmm.
But I don't know that that is really the best place to be. So the other ones were not urgent and important. That's very much downgrid, but still on the top surface. And then he had not urgent, not important. That would be very far in grid. No. Mm-mm.
No.
Yeah, not urgent. Fine. That's down grid-ish. And not important. No, that's in the bottom of the cube.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's way over here if you guys were rotating your precious little cube. Um, so anyway, my point is that I always thought, well, he's looking at something different than we're looking at. Um, because I would say to you that the greatest level of productivity is going to come when his model meets flow. And so it needs to be outgrid, not upgrid. And
Hmm.
certainly importance is still what's moving it to the surface of the change grid where stuff is actually going to get done. So,
Right. Right. You would need a protocol for like what he describes. Because think about like an emergency room situation. A
mhm, mhm.
person comes in and not breathing. They've been in automobile accidents. They have compound fractures. The most, it's an urgent situation, but in order of importance, the job is to get the patient stable first.
Well, yeah.
And, and then you prioritize other areas. From there, you use a kind of reductionist kind of thing in terms of priority. But getting stable makes the most sense, making sure the patient can breathe and
Yep,
those kinds of things.
triage, then stabilize, then
Right.
whatever the root causes are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess what we've been talking about is really being illustrated by one of those interior panels.
I thought the first step was to get the insurance information.
You're funny. Isn't that sad? But it really is true. It really
Yeah,
is true.
that's
Yeah.
if you can find a family member on behalf of the patient.
No, it's crazy, crazy, crazy. Okay, anywho, so yeah, we haven't labeled this call, so just for the heck of it, this is the Circle of Brilliance, and we are talking about some advanced concepts in the world of tension management. Last time around, we started talking about the change cube, and the week before that, or the session before that, we were talking about how your small change grid, your personal change grid, is simply floating around somewhere on this grand change grid of life. And there were a couple of questions I wanted to pick up on and carry on that subject. But last time around, I also mentioned you got your own change cube, and your change cube is floating around somewhere inside of the grand universe of change cube. So we are all merely one single expression of the full range of humanity, or whether we're looking at it two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally. So it's kind of a fun thing to do. But anyway, Brian brought up this question about urgent versus important. And so we say that urgency is really one of the ways that tension expresses itself. I don't think tension causes urgency. Urgency causes tension. Maybe they are feeding off of one another after the ball gets rolling, if you will. But I don't think of urgency as being a separate thing. Um, it's more like we talk about what are the inputs that we use to determine where someone is on the change grid or in the cube. And then we talk about outputs. So because my level of ability is low, that's an input, and my perceived level of challenge is high, that's an input. My level of tension is going to be up in stress, that's an output. And so that's why we have this X in the center of the change cube that are showing us these two resultant vectors. So if I use the inputs of challenge and scratch that, if I use the inputs of ability versus challenge, where I plot on the change grid, or that gives rise to where I plot in terms of drive and tension. Are you guys with me on that? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that it's interesting that when we're looking at the center, really are sorry, when we're looking at the X, we really are looking more about the outputs, the results of how people's perceptions are going to affect other things. And so those perceptions created a certain level of tension. And depending on how important we considered it to be, our likelihood of following through and getting it done is going to be, quite high. So, and Brian, if this is more information than you wanted, you just say so.
No, I think it's good because immediately what comes to mind to me is the urgency is more of the perspective. So it's the context of how things are playing out. Because think about it again, like an emergency room.
Yeah.
You go to emergency room with a certain perspective that something is urgent and you're sitting there. So from the emergencies room perspective, the triage perspective, that's something uniquely different, right? So you have all these little differences there. So so this symbiotic relationship between perception and perspective is playing out here.
I agree. I agree completely. And as you were pointing out, there's a contextuality, the whole thing. It is not just situation specific, because you could say the situation is the person is in the emergency room. That's the situation. Well, no, there was a whole chain of situations that got him there and are unfolding once you are there. And so triage is one situation you're going to encounter when you walk into an emergency room. Whoever's performing that triage has got a very different perspective than perhaps someone who is taking care of getting an emergency room bay ready for the next patient after the patient who is in that bay has been discharged or promoted up into the rest of the hospital, right? And so it's got to be situationally specific or activity specific. Now, Brian, to your point, you were saying when urgency is high and importance is high, we'd be right here if you guys can see the corner. So I'm looking at the interior panel that shows just the levels of tension and how they relate to importance, what the relationship there is. So that's the corner you're talking about. Now, Covey also talked about things that are not urgent, but are important. And if you look then over here, this vertical line right here is where we would be folding this so the graphic can be two-sided. So this little place I'm squiggling around, that is where tension is very low, but importance is very high. Now, we might think that, well, they're deep, deep down in apathy. This isn't going to get done. But that level of importance is going to impose itself on the reality, and the chances of the activity getting done are that much higher. Now, let me show you why the cube helps us to really understand that. rather than looking at high importance and how it connects to the levels of tension, look at low importance. And notice that the color fill does not go to white. It does not vanish. There is still a possibility of performance happening there. But if importance is low and tension is high, that's going to be very different than importance is low and tension is low.
Mm.
So when we talk about deep, deep, deep down in apathy, we're not just talking about high ability versus low challenge, because that we are assuming high importance when we're looking at a flat change grid. If we turn into cube, we're like, yeah, but there could be a bunch of stuff there that's very low on importance, and that's a very different pile of reality than the stuff that's of high importance and in apathy. So we're looking at the cube and we talk about deep, deep down in apathy. We're also diminishing importance to put us down in this faint, faint, faint gray kind of color. So what we're just trying to communicate here is that when importance is low, the likelihood of an outcome happening is also low, but it's not equally low. It's going to be based on their level of tension, how that comes into play. So certainly something that is of high tension but low importance is more likely to get done than something that is low tension and low importance, as you can see our little color bands here. Okay, is that interesting or is that just too much?
Hey T, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
So I really enjoyed this conversation because when in the earlier part of my career, one of the jobs I had was called the classification analyst. And that job entailed writing job descriptions. It entailed evaluating positions, and importance was a key factor in how we looked at job descriptions. And so it could be that you as a director may submit a request to me to have a position upgraded. And that involves taking a look at the new duties and responsibilities of that position and how important they were in the scheme of things. So this is really good conversation.
Excellent. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Yeah, we have to appreciate where importance comes into play. Oh, by the way, Shags just sent over a photograph of an assembled change cube. And I'll chat this photo over to all of you. Oh, we got to change this just first. So when you put it together and you tape it up, it really does become, I think, just a helpful way to envision what we're talking about. I mean, yeah. So it's a lot. I guess.
As I recall, that was before you introduced importance.
Yeah, well, right at the same time.
As a fourth category.
Well, size.
Size
was the fourth one that we added.
Okay, well, one of them, because this was only the the three-dimensional, not this. I didn't have anything to slide inside.
Oh, you'd put the X inside of it? Yeah. And that's why we try to leave the lid open. So, but nevertheless, where we got the concept of size from is when I first put, or at least conceptually, when I first printed out the ChangeCube and put it together, I got what I wanted. Then I wanted to print out another one, and something on my, when you give your print command, you can say what percentage size-wise you want it to be. And I wanted to be a little bit bigger. So I increased the size and ended up with a much larger ChangeCube. And I thought, oh, I can put a small ChangeCube inside of the large ChangeCube. And I went, oh, that means something. So how does the size of an activity now translate into how full you can actually be, and blah, blah, blah. That, by the way, took us to a lot of other, I'm going to say, advanced but rather pointless thoughts. And so one of them was, well, if you've got your ChangeCube is filled with, or let's say this, that outgrid and power is filled with activities, that doesn't mean you still don't have room in your capacity for stuff that's like deep apathy minutia that has to be taken care of, or if a high stress thing, a top priority suddenly appeared, that you wouldn't be able to some degree fit it in. to manage to do that kind of thing. So it did lead to another set of thoughts that describe certain situations that is going on. Like, have you guys ever wondered, and maybe Brian, you can give us the behind the scenes truth in this whole thing. Have you ever wondered how it is that you can call your doctor to make an appointment and they have no room for you for the next, couple of weeks or whatever? But if you call them up and say, I need to get in there and see somebody today, and you've got something that's non-emergent but quite urgent, they go like, well, we can probably fit you in. So you just have to kind of wait for a break in the thing. It's like, oh, there is some capacity that we could, take advantage of given the right set of circumstances. So, yeah. So
Right. Yeah. See, that's that queue system, right? And
Mhm.
so they have a protocol in terms of what is important and not important and urgent. And
Yes.
that's what they're determined that on. So I wonder, like, you don't think the cube itself would be a great way to kind of gamify um tension management with audiences, or
Oh,
you said
no,
like it is too
I
much?
think there are endless possibilities with creative things that you could do with the change grid, with the change cube and the change grid, and there's even a change sphere if you really want to create your whole set of shapes. But honestly, I don't know how marketable it is as a tool for human development professionals, or really for individuals who are just trying to do a better job of personal growth and development. I mean, if they find it interesting, then great, join us for the circle of brilliance. you know, and we can talk about this just because we like talking about it. But when we look at the practical application of it, some of the things that we envision as possible would be so cost intensive or just so investment intensive in terms of time and blah blah blah. And frankly, I have neither the interest nor the capacity, nor the whatever to do such a thing. But I hope someday someone might.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
I'd love to be able to have someone see a print, or rather a translucent change cube with all of their activities plotting spatially in this 3D environment. And then be able graphically on your screen to be able to zoom in and rotate and do all those things we see in sci-fi shows to really get an understanding of what's going on with all
That'd be
the.
really cool.
It would be very, very
Exactly.
cool. Very cool.
Exactly. And see, that's what I'm talking about, because they're using virtual technologies in learning
Yeah.
management systems to simulate different groups and that kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
that just comes to mind to me when I'm thinking about the power of tension management.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, I truly believe that everything about life is about tension management, that life is just giving us situations in which to exercise our tension management skills. And the better we are at managing ourself and the people that we care about around us, the better our lives are likely to be. And so, life is tension, tension is life. So, yeah, but and I'll bet you anything right now, the artificial intelligence graphics programs could easily depict what we're describing, but I think it would be depicting it as a static illustration right now. We need it to be a dynamic tool that is generated specifically for a change grid. And so that's the question is, what is that link between taking those four inputs that we give? So size, ability, challenge, and importance. How do we take those four inputs and have it generate a three-dimensional cube? And would it really mean, what would it really mean? Particularly if you add this, and again, if this is just too much for everyone to wrap their head around right now, that's fine. We don't need to be talking about this. But remember, I said that size is really more about the activity itself, and so if you were going to show this as a three-dimensional thing, I wouldn't just be showing you dots at the intersections of where things might be. I would be showing you some sort of a cube or a sphere that represents all four variables for that particular activity. So it wouldn't have, like if I said that the size of it is a 12, well, is that going to be such a giant ball inside of the cube that there's not much else to see? Or, is that something that's not revealed till we zoom into the activity level? When it comes to graphic possibilities, I think there's a lot of things to be thinking about and how that could be done. But anyway, it's beyond my skill set.
That would be really fascinating, because what I think the challenge is, again, from a attention manager's perspective, when you talk about burnout, stress, it the as human beings, we're just so disconnected from sensory things that we're picking up in the environment.
Yeah.
And so we'll resist that instead of learning from it, which is exactly what sensories are designed to do. It's just another set of information. But if we don't have a blueprint, if you will, to how to process that information or how to think about the information, then we'll misappropriate that moment for, its greatest use and highest ability to come out of that at a higher dimension of consciousness and a way of thinking about things. And the more I keep seeing this disconnect and these extreme behaviors, the more I'm realizing just how disconnected from self we are in terms of every other living system that understands that there's moving parts, there's parts within parts, and there's self-emergent whole, all these things, these dynamic relationships. So I'm trying to think of ways that we can connect the dots and understanding these dynamic relationships within
Well,
ourselves.
that's exactly what we've been trying to do for all these years with these concepts. You need to do your own version of the merging of brilliance in order to allow all of the most useful insights and discoveries to come to the surface, so you can merge them with all the rest of the great insights and discoveries that you've stumbled across. So I think that we're able to grow when we stop trying to choose and instead choose to integrate these insights and these models. As long as people are going to debate and discuss and argue about what's good, bad, right, or wrong, they're wasting time.
Right.
So just get them all merged together. Thank you for your contribution of brilliance. Anything that, if something is wrong with your model, I promise you the act of merging it will put a spotlight on it and will either resolve it or shake it out. So, we don't need to put energy into a lot of that. But anyway, you got to do kind of like the same thing for any sort of a pursuit. Any place where there's, I don't know, a structure, a discipline, So, okay, we've talked about the relationship between importance and tension. Let's for a moment talk about that other part of the X. That's the relationship between drive and importance. Now, keep in mind that when you are looking at this particular relationship between drive and importance, you are traveling only along the heart line. If anything, you need to think about this as something that would parallel Csikszentmihalyi's thoughts about flow. And so that's what we're looking at. So don't think there's an upgrade or a downgrade. There's no stress. There's no apathy. Everyone right here is on the heart line of power. So now we're saying that we're in this band, this range where drive is what's really moving things. How does importance impact drive? How does drive impact importance? Is it a one-way influence, two-way influence, et cetera? So that's what we're kind of looking at. So let's look at what happens when we say that the drive is very high and the importance is very high. Now, keep in mind that in order for me to get at the highest place of drive and the highest place of importance, I'm sitting at coordinates 12, 12. So to put all the perspectives together, I am saying that I have a high level of challenge, a high level of ability, a high level of importance, and as a result, I have a high level of drive. But here's the interesting piece. I have a moderate level of tension, right? I'm in power. I'm not up in stress or that. So I'm saying that for us to be in that corner of the change grid that I'm squiggling around right now, this would, because we're looking at high drive, the moment I'm looking at the highest level of drive, I automatically know I'm looking at very high ability and very high challenge, right? So I got high, 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 and then that only leaves me tension, and the tension is moderate. Right, because I would actually be, well, I'd be along the heart line. I'd be in this blue zone down here. So it's moderate level of tension. Does anyone find that curious? That the model would be implying that maximum productivity can only be achieved when tension is moderate and drive is high.
That makes sense because to me, productivity as it is currently experienced, especially in popular psychology or media, is a distraction for most people because they're inundating themselves with too much stimuli. So remember, when these attentional faculties are at play, is automatically sizing things up for relevancy for application. So in other words, it's taking in some data, but it's depending on data that's already has a strong synaptic connection. So when you're dialed into anything and those attentional faculties, and faculties being plural, there's a lot of systems that are at play there, it's minimizing new information, it's taking in bits of new information, but it's relevant to something that you're dialed into. And that's how you can appropriate energy for its optimal use. Because everything about the brain, remember, is all about to preserve and conserve energy. So if you're taking in too much all at once, you're going to hinder productivity.
You're right. It's in fact, we know that to be true because even if we go back to 1908, Yerkes Dodson inverted U theory of performance and productivity, that whole inverted U thing shows that optimum performance occurs when sensory activity is moderate. And if the sensory activity is too low or too high, we're going to see that performance be negatively impacted. Now, we came along later and said, well, because we are a species that is operating at the edge of our survival abilities, we skew that. It's not a perfect bell curve. We can actually tolerate a higher level of sensory activity and still find great benefit, maybe even increasing benefit to it because it's commanding our attention more, or we've been able to tolerate it. So, it's kind of a relative thing, but that's why our bell curve is always skewed. So we say the relationship between tension and productivity is not a perfect bell curve. The level of performance is going to go up as tension increases up to a certain point. But once it goes beyond that certain point, once the level of tension hits stress, then we're going to see an immediate nosedive in the performance as opposed to a gentle bell curve decrease. Nope, we're growing, and then we hit a snapping point. Now, one of the reasons why that came to be part of the model was because back in the 1980s, everyone was studying the addictive process and dysfunctional families and all the psychodrama that comes from living in a dysfunctional kind of a world. And that's kind of where we had to acknowledge the fact that in today's world, being dysfunctional is normal. Because once more than half the population shares any trait, we would say that trait becomes maybe average, maybe typical, but at a certain point, it just becomes normal. It's normal in our society to be dysfunctional. Unfortunately, according to the fossil record, dysfunction equals destined for extinction. So we really are a species that is operating at the edge. And unless people are really hiding their heads in the sand, they have to know that our species is a decision or two away from unavoidable demise. So, right, or am I just being fatalistic? I also believe we're highly adaptable. We're also very resilient. And so the smart will survive. So, it'll all be good. We will work our way up that spiral dynamic, but the population could be cut in half,
Mhm.
depending if we make the wrong decisions. So yeah, anyway, that's my little public service announcement for the day. Yeah, don't ever accuse us as being motivational. Yeah, so anyway, basically this is saying when tension is moderate, we supposedly have the best opportunity to achieve greatness. So if we are there and our drive is high and the importance is high, we are extremely likely to get whatever that is done. Okay, again, high challenge, high ability, high drive, high importance, moderate tension. All right. Any agreements, disagreements with that? Is that all resonating pretty well?
Mhm.
Oh, good, because I'm going to ask you what difference does it make. So now, if I have a very high level of drive and I view the importance as being very low, I still have high ability. I still have high challenge. I still have a high degree of drive. I'm still at moderate tension, but the importance is very low. Is that going to affect the outcome? So, Brian, what do you think?
I think it'll affect the intensity that you're experiencing that. So like I'm thinking of the neurochemical suit, if you will, that's involved in that.
Yeah.
And one of those, when there's a state of arousal, is acetylcholine.
Yeah.
Acetylcholine puts the spotlight on what needs to be learned,
Mhm.
right? So if you do that with enough intensity, you can override, the fear, anxiety, and those kinds of things. And you put yourself in a position where you'll at least dip your toe in it and see what happens. And you'll be, depending on that experience, you can come back to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
in other words, you can manufacture, if you will, uh, this kind of importance that you need at the opposite level or the opposite extreme that we were just exploring.
Right. Right. Yeah. And
If it,
so I think you're absolutely right. These activities where again, we're looking at a low level of importance, but a high level of drive. So again, everybody, you're very much outgrid, maybe even in the danger zone for where we're looking at, you are in the danger zone. It's almost like a danger corner now that it's a cube, but nevertheless, you are way upgrid when the ones we're talking about, you're going to go there and conquer. I'm talking about now you're going to be in the down. See, it's not downgrade, it's down cube corner of the outgrade danger zone. Can you guys envision that? If right, this is why you really want to assemble a change cube. you can really see it. I do believe that because the drive is high, that activity is still likely to get done. But
Mhm.
how did you, as a highly driven individual, feel about doing activities that are just not very important, but you're driven to get them done? What's that all about?
Yeah.
And even in your role as a coach, let's say that you've got someone who's in this little, corner of that cube. I'm kind of going like, all right, wait, why do you have so much drive to get something done that isn't important? So do you guys find in your world of client work, occasionally people are putting all kinds of energy into getting something done, and it's not a stress reaction to it. It's just for whatever reason, they're just hell-bent on taking care of something that absolutely is not important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these things do end up happening. I would say that could be an avoidance behavior, an escapist behavior. Maybe there's something manic going on when it comes to neurochemistry. They're fixated on something that really doesn't matter, but they're going to get it all done. You know what I'm saying? It's like this is an odd bird. And we could very much benefit from helping them do that, because if this person with all this drive, and again, to have this highest level of drive, they're in highly challenging situations where they have the ability to handle it, although they're going to be put to the test. So they need to liberate this energy for the things that are of even greater importance. Don't get bogged down, even though, you know, there's a challenge there. Oh, there's a puzzle, I'll just do it. But no, there's something here that needs to be coached very much. And it might be about letting things go. Get them out of your cube altogether. All right. Now, if we go over to this other little side of things, now we have where the drive is very low and the importance is very high. Now, this would actually be at the origin. So you're looking at a very low level of ability, a very low level of challenge that's giving rise to a very low level of drive. But let's say the activity is rather important. If you look at this blue kind of fill pattern, you can see it's a moderate shade of blue. So there is still a moderate likelihood of that task being performed. But if the importance wasn't there, now you've got low ability, low challenge, low importance, low drive, and tension is really kind of meaningless there, because you know, look where you're at. There's just no intensity, no nothing at all going on there. So you can kind of understand why this person would be absolutely clueless, perhaps to even the existence of the situation that you have in mind as you're performing that evaluation of them. You know?
That's why I think this importance is a full contact sport in terms of, you know, really help shaping and setting the context for your kind of engagement and things that you don't know that you might be interested in. So you start putting importance with drive together. Now you set yourself up, because remember, even things that pique your interest in terms of the dopamine effect, you can, you know, emit the same amount of dopamine as if you're actually engaged in the activity.
Right.
So something has to take that aroused state and move you forward. And that's where level of importance and the drive, the combination of those two, I think, plays a significant factor, because you're introducing other neurochemicals that can certainly help you mitigate that once like lackadaisical kind of like, I'll just kind of do it, whatever.
Yeah.
And it could change, it can be a game changer literally for people.
Well, this is why I think this discussion about importance is really important. That's how the cube ended up coming into play. And so, you know, it really is just the truth that among those three input vectors, I know there's a fourth one, size, but just look at the three that are defining the cube configuration. I know that ability and challenge are the ones we look at the most, because they're going to give rise to the person's level of tension. And I know that's what we talk about. And I really believe that if that's the only thing we ever talked about, you could have, you know, become kind of a concept that everyone in the country understood, everyone on the planet, because it's simple. It's incomplete, but it's simple enough that people can wrap their head around 5 levels of tension and how they got there. So that's really marketable. It's very practical, applicable, useful, etc. However, it doesn't answer the full range of questions that we in a human development capacity need to be able to answer. And that is, how come people have got the right level of challenge and the right level of ability and they're still not doing it? So just because someone's in power guarantees nothing. So
yeah, see, for me, that's what importance, the more I kept thinking about it since we talked about it, it reminds me of the iceberg.
Yep.
Right? Like, you know, 90% of its mass is underneath the surface and you don't see it. So when, again, you think about the processes that how the brain process what makes something important or not, there's a sense of strong sensory component. Those things are beyond are below the consciousness level. These are things that are connected to the autonomic nervous system.
Yep.
So things, for instance, like the reticular activation system or the ascending reticular activation system, these are things that are at the brainstem. So they're processing immediately some kind of sensory thing, and it's taking in vision, it's taking in auditory kinds of things, and it's sending signals to the cortex.
Yes.
Right. And so these are things that are happening beneath the surface, so to speak. And I think that's why it's important to explore it.
Well, and I think that, a good way to illustrate that is that if you wanted to have more dopamine, or whatever the neurotransmitter may be, you can't generally just sit there and using your mind only will that change in your neurochemistry. I'm sure you can have a little bit of impact on certain neurotransmitters just from how you're using your mind and all that sort of stuff. But there's a reason why they say to you, I forget, Linda, you're on the call. What's the acronym for the 4 things you do on that Saturday exercise thing?
EDSO.
What's that? EDSO?
Is EDSO, the endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and
Yes.
oxytocin?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
They put it in a different order, but yes, that's it.
Yeah. And so if you want more serotonin or whatever, I think the answer was get yourself in movement. Get out there and start dancing or whatever, and your serotonin would go up. Hug somebody and oxytocin will go up. Right there, they had specific behaviors that you could go and do. But to Brian's point, you had to go do something. There had to be something that was stimulating it beyond thinking about
It was called Dose.
Dose.
And every day they had a different video depending on which one you wanted to have for your dose for the day.
Yes.
That's good.
Interesting. We tried to do something similar one year. I don't know, Linda, I don't know if this might even, I don't know, we're this, yeah. But we were talking about having one of those page a day calendars. And what you would ask yourself each day is, are you feeling too far upgrid or downgrid? And then when you turned it over, we'd have like an upgrade maneuver for the day and a downgrade maneuver for the day. So you could choose whichever one you really needed. We never produced that because producing a calendar is a very complicated thing.
Oh, that would be fun. You can do that in like Notion, because even
Yeah.
Notion has like an AI component to it. That would be really fun.
It could be great fun, but again, going back to where does it fit in? Where does it fit in for marketing as a standalone product? That's hardly going to pull in, So you always have to be factoring these things in when you're, putting your energy out there. But yeah, it's a fantastic idea. We've often said that you can have $1 million idea every minute, but check your bank account and tell me how it's working to just have it.
Right.
So
and I'm a 5 in the Enneagram, so I definitely
go.
have lots of ideas.
There you go. All right. So now I don't know if you just lost the image. I squiggled something and I shouldn't have squiggled. There we go. Anyway, it's back for me now. So the way that I tried to get someone to understand importance, back in the day, we could use the word trump, that certain things trumped. And what was trumping one activity over another was the level of importance. So it doesn't matter how strong your ability is. It doesn't matter where the challenge is. It doesn't really matter how those ratios work themselves out. If it's not important, it's very unlikely to get done. And so you see, that same thing's going on. I believe that of those 3 inputs, that importance trumps the other 2. Isn't it a shame that the connotations, or rather denotations, of the word Trump have been so impacted? Ugh, I want my word back. Okay, now to take it to another step, though, I could say to clients, you could have a whole group of people who have got a great level of tension to get the stuff done. And it really is important. They've got great ability and they see plenty of challenge to get them fully engaged. But if you don't take size into consideration, you still may not get the performance that you're looking for. Why is what I've just said true? Because that would mean that size ultimately trumps importance. So why is that? Why is that true? That even you give me a whole group of people who agree it's really important, and yeah, we've got the ability to do it, and yeah, the challenge is there, and yeah, we got plenty of drive to get it done, and you know, all the stuff is in the right place. Why am I saying that that still doesn't guarantee performance? All right, it goes back to the. Oh, go right ahead, Edie. Go ahead.
You know, I was just going to say, it reminds me that I put off writing. I just about choked on something that I was going to write for 25 years before my first book. And it was very important, but it was overwhelming. It was just, it felt like too big of a mountain to climb.
There you go.
And so I was paralyzed for 25 years.
And even the words you just used imply that there was a perception of size that made the activity so daunting that you just wait, I don't have the capacity for this right now. I can't fit it in. And so that's why we say this to executives all the time. If you've got a group of people who are overloaded with things to get done, well, then we have to factor that in. They don't have the capacity. There's no room. There's no bandwidth. There's no energy. I don't care about the, you know, all these other dimensions we're looking at. If it's just plain too big, it's just plain too big.
So they're over too much stimuli as opposed comparable to the energy to actually utilize that stimuli for its greatest good.
I would say that it's probably more of an act of being overwhelmed.
Yeah, I didn't feel
Yeah, because Brian,
you know what else is, and so many of the speaker authors would say, just write a little bit, just take
a little bit each
time. Yeah.
There's only one way to eat a whale. So, you know, but I don't see a whole bunch of people eating whales. I think that we have to appreciate the fact that every day, we say like we're blessed with time. We're blessed with a certain volume, a certain capacity for what we can actually do in that day. And so, yeah, time is one of the factors, but there are other factors involved as well, like what's your level of energy about, and what is your availability of whatever the real resources that you need happen to be. You may not have the actual resources that you want. There's environmental factors that come into the evaluation of size. And so I think that we really should change it from the order they're in right now to maybe size, importance, ability, challenge. And does challenge trump ability? Does ability trump challenge? No, ability overcomes challenge. And so it would end up being SIAC. I don't like SIAC. So right now, by the way, the order in is size, ability, challenge, importance, because we like sassy. So that would be the your sassy ratings. So you can only do so much with the letters. All right. Anyway,
do you think they trump each other as it is they just share a symbiotic relationship where they kind of play off of one another?
Well, no, they play off of one another for sure. That's no mistake. In a healthy kind of a situation, I would like to think more often than not, people living their given days, these things are just interacting with one another and generating what they generate. But if things become contentious, if the competition for my resources, if I've got too many priorities, too much stuff is too important, then too much stuff is requiring too many resources, now it gets into a battle.
That's where the brain starts to compartmentalize things. For instance, like it's impossible to write a letter and have a cognitive conversation that's, because you're using the same energy system. And so you need you need non-competing stimuli systems for it to be efficient. And that's where the brain starts compartmentalizing things. That's how it uses energy. So that's why they say things like texting and driving are dangerous because you need the peripheral vision. You need to be able to focus on the road, not just on what's ahead, but what's to the side. And then you're manually using dexterity and those kinds of systems. You're competing for the same systems of energy. And
Mhm.
so it really compromises quality.
It can certainly do that. And again, let's remind ourselves, we're just talking about perceptions.
Right.
Because people's real capacity is, I'm going to believe, far greater than they believe it is. And I'll even take it a step into more of the neuroscience kind of things. Our capacity might actually be far greater than our brain wants us to understand, because the brain is saying, why should we work harder? All is just fine. So maybe it's good that you think your capacity is more limited than it really is, because if you were actually operating at maximum capacity every single day, your brain would get taxed. I wouldn't believe that's the brain is just going like, we don't want to work that hard.
And that's why, people call it the lazy brain, but it's just designed to operate for efficiency. And so
And
to your
long-term
point,
survival. It
exactly.
that doing too much, you can do it for a day or two, but there's a price that's going to be paid energetically
That's
later
it.
on.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so I would say to you that, in fact, I'll give you an example. I was watching a little video about this gal that everyone called a super mom, super gal or whatever, but she just thought what she was doing was normal and necessary. And it's a story that is told countless times, every single day all across. But this gal was a single mom, and she was going to college to get her degree, and she was working a full-time job. And so, taking care of the household, doing all the things that she was like a one person, does it all kind of thing. She's taking care of the kids. She's taking care of her education. She's taking care of what she needs to do to make some money. And people were referring to her as some kind of a super mom. Well, what they're implying is that she had a greater capacity to get everything done than the average person would have. Meanwhile, she would describe herself as just doing what needed to be done. She just rose to the occasion. She thought of herself as being average. This is normal. And so I think it's interesting that even that cube we have in front of us that we describe our capacity for a day, that's nothing but our perception.
Exactly.
And so we could
Exactly.
probably do a whole lot more if circumstances were such that was unavoidable or necessary, or we felt strongly enough in the benefit it would bring us that we would do all those things.
Right.
So
So see, let me make sure I'm clear. Are we saying that size trumps importance?
I believe that when the competition gets really tough, that size is going to ultimately dictate outcome more than importance is going to dictate outcome. So, because I can't guarantee an output, the outcome, if I have no capacity to get it done. And that might be energy again, it might be physical resources, could be money, could be just what do I have energetically inside of my own physiology, because I'm not sleeping well, I'm not eating well, I'm not taking care of myself. What does that do to my capacity? So yeah, I truly do believe, Tim, that if things get into a huge battle, will it get done or won't it get done? The one we really have to recognize as the true limitation is the perceived size of that activity.
And,
So
don't you
I
think
agree
too?
that,
Go ahead, Tim.
well, real quickly, I was just going to wrap that. So in my work on the HR side, it's the reverse, right? It's the ranking of the importance of the activity list, and then the size, because from a performance management perspective, we have had instances where the employee may select or give attention and energy to the activity based on size, i.e. selecting and giving attention to the smaller size activity on the list. But that activity may not be as important in the scheme of things as an activity that's larger in size. And so that's what I was thinking as I was listening to the discussion on that. And so from that angle, it could be that the importance of the activity list may trump the size.
Oh, and let me throw this at you in a little different kind of a puzzle and see if this is something you've encountered before. Let's say that you have an organization, you're in charge of HR, you have an organization that is high performing, and the priorities have all been set, and people are really, it's working like a machine. We got all the right people in the right roles, doing the right thing, the right time, they've got the right resources, everything is done, everything is all good. And then the executives come to you as the leader of HR and say, you need to reduce FTE by 10% this year without sacrificing outcome. What would you be going then? It's like, what? So
Well, yeah, it definitely would. I don't know. I still see that as the criticality being the most important activities on that list of activities.
right, because I would say that in a properly functioning organization, they would say, we need to look at importance first. And then we need to ensure that the size is manageable. And so if I want all these very important things to get done, I have to recognize, respect, and respond about the environment in such a way that all of my people are given the time, they are given the resources. They, we understand that every day people only have X amount of hours, and so we need to have enough of those FTEs to be able to get it all done. I would say a smart company is going to do this strategic part of the thinking based on the priorities first, the importance first, and then let everything else structure itself around that. But then what happens if for whatever reason, the tasks grew in size, the demands became greater, but I still have the same amount of people and the same amount of resources. So the size changed. So thoughts about that? I know I was babbling, but
well, I like that, but added to that could be that those executives issue a demand and say we need to do X, Y, Z. However, in that, we need to reduce your FTE by 20%.
yeah.
So we now have, from a size perspective, we've got a smaller team, a smaller amount of resources, but yet we still have critical activities that need to get done. So the importance of things has still trumped the size. But right. it puts us in a difficult situation where we now have employees saying, listen, I'm getting things added to my plate, but I'm not getting any help getting it done. And you're still telling me it's important and critical.
That's right, because from the executive level, it's easy to tell people what they're going to do, but there's nobody inside of an organization that is magical. Sooner or later, and I get it, if I'm an executive, I want to boost profits. I do want to tighten things as much as I possibly can. I don't want extra people. I don't want whatever, is absolutely optional. I get it. I completely get it. But they have to be realistic in their expectations around the limiting factors. And the limiting factors, at least one of them, is available person power, right? So how often have you had to say to those executives, we need to take a little moment to look at reality?
Hey, good luck with that.
Well, exactly. But you know what? Good luck to the executives getting what they want if they believe reality doesn't apply to them.
Right.
So sooner or later, something's going to win, and I promise you, what's going to win is reality. So.
Whether they want it to or not.
Right. I don't care how loud they get about it or however, because honestly, none of them could step into the role and actually get the work done. So are they helping? Maybe we want to tighten the ship, get rid of an executive or two. Can't do that. So And again, you know, I talk about us being a species that's a decision or two away from our demise. I also think that applies at the level of corporate performance. So we are watching CEO or executive compensation get higher and higher and higher, inflation go higher and higher and higher, and then the executives on a good day, on their best day, is still begrudgingly giving people the money that they need, the resources that they need. So as that continues to become more and more problematic, then work is going to change. You know, that species might survive, but life as we know it can have elements that will die, will fall by the wayside. And maybe this whole allowing executives to make the amount of money they make could very well change. Because keep in mind, the only reason why they get paid as much as they get paid is because people allow it to happen.
Yep. Exactly.
So, you know, I get it. That's the way this a capitalistic society works. But who said capitalism was going to be the model that would go? And oh God, I hate that way that might make me sound, because I believe that capitalism is still a really strong model. But you've heard me say before, I believe that it is morally wrong for anyone to profit off of the illness of another individual. So get well paid, but to make profit off of illness, well, your thought process alone means I need a sick society. Okay,
Right.
where does that take us?
Right. That's these unchecked balances that are playing out in capitalism. Because to your point, I don't think it's a bad model. It's just one that can't have unchecked balances, and we have too
Well,
many.
and I would say to you that if you look at any of the isms that exist today, this is also, you guys have to recognize that all the isms, whether it's socialism, communism, capitalism, all the isms are exercises in tension management. And so it may very well be that the model that humanity needs going forward is a totally new ism. And I don't know what that ism would be. I'm sure people are coining all kinds of little phrases. Except for a while, I thought about having a, didn't people talk for a long time about having a humanistic approach to the way things are built and arranged, humanism?
Yeah.
I don't know. All I know is that none of the isms we currently have operating seem to be working as well.
Marianne Williamson is running for president. That's what she's about.
Is that right? And again, you know, it's good that we're seeing these rumbles, but it could be many election cycles before there is going to be sufficient awareness, understanding, commitment among the voters to make a different set of decisions.
Yeah. I mean, tensionism or something.
Well, you know,
put that
whatever.
out there.
I mean, because we, you know, maybe capitalism got us where we are, but where it's gotten us is unsustainable. So I forget what show we were watching. It might have been Murdoch Mysteries. Linda, you can remind me, where they wanted to reduce the population of the planet by some dramatic level because they said we're approaching 1 billion people on the planet or something, and there's no way we can feed that many people. And the whole episode, as I don't know if you watch Murdoch Mysteries, but it's an excellent program in many, many ways. But very often they'll come up with something that is paralleling what we're experiencing in life today. And that was, we're going like, no, are we already at 7 billion people on this planet?
But it's going down. It's going down. They're worried about the younger people supporting.
Right, because you can't have economies the way we have if we don't have the population necessary to support that economy. And so, because we talk about GDP and all that, if that goes down, we got problems, and that's dictated by population. So, so they need us. Well, all that would mean is that if we said, you know what, maybe we need to reduce the population, so we're reducing our impact on the planet. And I'm not saying reduce the population by doing anything horrible, but just stop having babies, reduce the number of children being born on the planet. What's wrong with, I think they said that in order for us to hold the size of the planet level, every human being has to produce 1.3, I think is what it was, might be 1.2 offspring. Every person has to produce 1.2 because they said that that 0.2 has to factor in early deaths, things like that, that generally aren't counted in the big population growth sorts of things.
Isn't that what China did though, and it really didn't work?
Yeah, they said you had, for a while, one baby was all you could have. And you got in serious trouble if you had more than one. And now I think it's Japan that's going like, no, we need more. We'll incentivize you to have kids. So what's going on? But it's all about an unwillingness to scale down. And sooner or later, that is going to become unsustainable.
So yeah, I think it's a matter of allocation of resources,
Right.
and this whole idea of abundance.
Yep. I think you're right. But again, we've been talking about capacity. It may very well be that Mother Earth has a finite capacity. Not only where we could fit people, forget that. It's really about how can we feed people? How can we give them sufficient fresh water? And, as these resources become more and more, challenged, we have to recognize that a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are a population that's infesting a planet. And that doesn't bode well for the future. So, yeah. I mean, live in the desert for a while and you'll develop a whole different appreciation for water. Yeah. Yep. Okay, anyway, our time is up for today. So what I would like to do next time we speak is to 2 dimensions and talk a little bit about where we all share a common spot on the universal change grid, the grand change grid of life. Do we share 6-6? Do we share 0-0? Where did we begin? Where do we enter the world? Where is our change grid born? And then how does it expand and grow to find its place in the world of the change grid?
Interesting.
I'm glad it's interesting because
It is. It's fascinating.
I do this. I do this because I like to think that the Circle of Brilliance is a community of people who just plain enjoy thinking. It doesn't have to be practical all the time. Sometimes it can just be thought provoking and stretching our abilities to envision things. So that's where we're at on these 2 subjects for sure.
Definitely makes me think.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll throw this out to you. One of the things as we turned it into a 3-dimensional cube is we said, why do we think that everyone's a perfectly shaped cube? There's a lot of skewed people out there. So maybe your 3-dimensional object is somehow stretched across a particular dimension. And so it might be a 3-dimensional object, but it doesn't necessarily take the shape of a cube. Why would we believe humans are cubic? Some of us are squashed and squished, stretched, and So what does your
I'm in perfect shape. Round.
Yeah, exactly. What does your change polygon? What's a 3-dimensional polygon called? Is that I don't know if there's a word for that, but maybe that's a polygon. Okay, anyway.
Blob.
Yeah. Well, just going to call it a blob. That'll be our new technical term. Each of you represents a blob somewhere. Out there. Okay, anyway.
Oh, it's called a polyhedron.
A polyhedron. I can make use of that.
Interesting.
But
3-dimensional polygon is a polyhedron.
Yeah, even a polyhedron is going to carry with it some uniformity, some consistency in the way the shape takes place. So is there one that we could say is skewed, is whatever? I don't know. Let's see if we can find a polyhedron that doesn't necessarily have to be consistent. It's shapes it's built from. Okay, anywho, yeah, it gets far worse than a cube, let me tell you. All right, we'll talk more next time. So thank you everyone for joining in. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Yeah.